Passionate, driven, enthusiastic, euphoric. This is who we are as entrepreneurs. But how we leverage these incredible attributes to dream and build businesses that scale and grow is what this podcast is all about. Hello, I'm attorneypreneur Josh Brown, and welcome to Franchise Euphoria. How to know if a business is ready to franchise. That's what we're going to talk about today on Franchise Euphoria. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Josh Brown here. Thrilled to be back for another episode. And, recently I gave a presentation and focused on this topic, how to know if a business is ready to franchise. And there's really lots of things to consider when it relates to this type of question. But what I focused on for this presentation was 6 key points that you as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, should be thinking about to know if you're ready to franchise your business. I get this question all the time. People call, they reach out, they say, hey, Josh, I've got a business, I've been successful, I think I want to franchise. And I said, well, why do you want to franchise? And they say, well, I've had 5 people come in and ask me if I'm going to franchise the business, so I think it's probably a good time to grow it. And then we get into a conversation about what that should look like. Well, one of the first questions that I ask when I'm speaking with somebody is, how many locations do you have open and operating? And oftentimes there's business owners may have one very, very successful location where, they feel as though they have their systems down. They feel as though they have their processes down. They're profitable. People love what they do. They're developing a brand, and now they're ready to franchise their business. Well, one of the considerations that an entrepreneur really needs to think long and hard about is, should I open a second location before I franchise the business? It's not mandated, of course, that you do that, but it's often recommended that you do, because it's very hard to go from one successful location to 2 locations. In fact, I think it's harder to go from 1 to 2 than it is from, 2 to 4 to 6 to 8, because really duplicating that first location usually takes the longest amount of time, takes the most effort, and really business owners are usually surprised at all the difficulties they have in going from one successful location to a second. Now, of course, in franchising in this day and age, not all franchises are retail locations, right? I mean, we have mobile franchises. We have franchises that are home-based franchises that are up and coming. And so, obviously every situation is a little bit different. But one of the first things I want to look at if I'm talking with somebody about whether or not their business is ready to franchise is, how successful are you right now with your business? The next point is, what do the numbers look like? Do you understand your numbers? Do you understand the financials of your business? Do you understand what is making your business successful? Because oftentimes the financial numbers of a business tell a story. And I'm often surprised at how many entrepreneurs, and frankly, successful entrepreneurs, don't really understand their numbers. They don't really know their profit margins. They don't really know what their hardline expenses are. And they don't know what the most successful thing is about their business. You see, when most businesses start, they start off very simple. People have an idea. They want to solve a problem in the market. They see an opportunity where somebody has tried to solve a problem, maybe hasn't done it that well, or maybe they want to improve upon it, and they want to go there and they want to start a business. And oftentimes when you're starting a business, you're really trying a lot of things and you're seeing what sticks. And the stuff that sticks, you continue to do. And the stuff that doesn't, you stop doing. Well, there's a lot of fear that goes into that, but there's not a lot of strategy usually that goes into that, because you're trying a whole lot of different things. What's harder is when you find some success, now that begets other success. And what it does is it also begets other people saying, hey, why don't you try doing this? Why don't you get into doing this? Now that you've had such a great, success in in your burger shop. Why don't you start, serving X, Y, and Z? And so you start to expand your menus, you start to expand your offerings, and you start to become something more than what you were when you first started. Well, sometimes that's good, and sometimes that just takes you away from what's most profitable in your business. So you have to understand how to see that through the financial data. And you also have to understand how to see that through a proven system. So that's one of the other things that I try to focus on when I'm working or speaking with an entrepreneur is tell me about your proven system. Literally take me step by step through what your proven system is and why you think your system is ready to franchise. Next, I always want to know about the simplicity of the system. Touching on what I just spoke about, franchises and good franchises at their core are really simple. And let's not confuse simple with meaning with easy. I'm not saying that they're simple because they're easy to run. I'm saying they're simple and clear businesses because the idea is that you're going to take this business model, you're going to take this process that you've created, that you've slaved over, that you've fine-tuned, and now you're going to sell this to somebody who very likely has no experience in that business. So it has to be simple enough for people to come in and run. The more complicated the business model, the more difficult it is to scale. And so while there are differing levels of simplicity with franchise systems, it's always important to keep your eye on what the focus of the business is, because a lot of times it's a good way to cut out the fat, trim the fat of the business, and really hone in to what makes your business special. So I always want to know, how simple is your system? Next thing I want to know is, do you have an operations manual? In my last episode, we talked about how important operations manuals are and how I'm really going to focus in on some of these upcoming episodes on the operations manual, because I'm seeing a lot of businesses and a lot of entrepreneurs that are really trying to grow too fast, and they're trying to grow without going through the necessary steps, painstaking steps, to make sure that they have a good operations manual. Your operations of your business is the Bible of your business. It's what's going to help you become more efficient. It's what's going to help you be attractive to somebody else who is looking to buy in to that same business model. And it's going to help you and your team stay focused and grow in the right ways. And it's also a living and breathing document. So when you're working on an operations manual for your business, or if you're listening to this now and you're thinking, oh, geez, I don't have anything like that, it's just all up in my head, what I would challenge you to do is think about your business from start to finish. What are the things that are necessary to make it run? How does it run? What does that include? And start writing those things down. I know for my franchise clients, I have a franchise operations manual template that I've created that helps them really through that process and helps them identify and get those things down on paper. So of course, if anybody's interested in learning more about that, just email me, josh@indiefranchiselaw.com, and I'll be happy to share more information about that operations manual template. But it's so important. And not all operations manuals are equal. I mean, if you go online right now, you could find thousands of operations manuals on Google or anywhere. But that doesn't mean they're good. You have to have it applied well to your business. And in the franchise context, it's very, very important that it's done a certain way. So if you are considering turning your business into a franchise, don't just go get any kind of operations manual and try to fill in the gaps. Make sure you talk to somebody who knows what they're doing about that before you waste your time, energy, and effort on that. The next thing I talk to people about when they're considering, whether or not their business is ready to franchise is, what's the market size? Like, how big is your market? I mean, I'm amazed at a lot of people don't know that. And you might be saying, well, what do you mean, Josh, your market size? Well, if you're operating a business in one location, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be successful in a second location. It also doesn't necessarily mean, it doesn't mean that, just because you're successful in one geographic region, that doesn't mean it's going to transfer over to other regions. And so you really need to take the time to figure out what is the size of the market for you for your initial growth. So when I like to think of it when I'm working with business owners is that if you're going to franchise your business, what you really want to focus on for the most part is getting the first few franchisees in the system. And when you get them in the system, it's going to be very, very important that you get the right people in the system. And what you want to do is you want to build that out throughout your local market. So you want to get an idea of how many different territories could this business go in? What is the point at which I'm saturating the market? What do the territories look like? What is the need for this product in this particular market? Dominate in your 100-mile radius and then expand out from there. Too many times people grow too fast. They want to open up locations all over the country and they want to do it, multiple, I want to open up hundreds of locations over the next couple of years. And I say, well, why? I mean, let's take time to prove out this concept even more. Let's fine tune it over the first 10 to 15 franchisees. And let's do this in your 100-mile radius. And you're going to identify things that are wrong with your system that you can improve upon. You're going to identify challenges with franchisees that you need to improve upon. Do that when they're close by so you can better handle fires that occur or catastrophes that you can hopefully avoid, as opposed to, having a place in Indiana, having a place in California and Florida. Now, that said, there are opportunities that arise where you should definitely consider it, even if it is outside your radius. But as a general proposition, I always encourage business owners, look at your immediate market and then expand from there. Typically, the slow growth process of dominating your localized market and expanding out, you'll have typically a better chance of success than you would otherwise. Now, this is certainly not the last thing that I would talk to people about, but one of the most important things, and the last thing I'm going to talk about on this particular podcast episode, that so many people don't think about when they turn their business into a franchise, or if they're going to turn their business into a franchise, is what is the ongoing value that a franchisor can add to its franchisees? So if you are considering turning your business into a franchise and thus becoming a franchisor, it's not good enough that you're just providing a system for your franchisees. Yeah, that's wonderful. That'll get them going. That'll get them started. But in my experience, if the only value you provide as a franchisor is that you're providing the initial system, then about a year or two into that model, the franchisee is going to say, geez, I'm kind of spending a lot on royalties and I'm paying a lot of fees. And I kind of know how to run this business now that I've been doing it for 2 years. What value am I getting from the franchisors? And if you don't have very clear long-term value for your franchisees, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to succeed as a franchise. So I would challenge you to take the time to think about that. A good example, if you look at sign companies or, and I just use that as an example because I know some of them have had real good success in providing long-term value for their franchisees, because that type of a franchise really places a high value on R&D, research and development, because there's a lot of technological advancements. There's advancements in the tools and the equipment and so forth. And the franchisors, if they're doing it the right way, they're investing money, effort, and time into remaining on the cutting edge of what it is for their franchisees. That's the kind of long-term value you want to provide. Yes, you want to provide the initial system, but you've got to say to a franchisee, now that you're 2-3 years in, we're still providing value because we're going to provide you with the most up-to-date equipment. We're going to help you understand that this is a better technology to use than what the competitors are using. That will give you a distinct competitive advantage in the marketplace beyond just here's the system, follow it. Because trust me, franchisees, after they've been following it and after they've paid the franchise fee, paid for the build out of the location, paid ongoing royalties, paid management fees, training fees, marketing fees, you name it, they're gonna need to have ongoing value that they can readily identify, or else they're going to get frustrated. And it makes perfect sense. That is all part of the win-win proposition. So again, these are just a few of the things that I like to talk about, but there's some of the most important things that I find that I'm discussing with, my clients or with really anybody who I'm speaking to who's asking about growing their business and deciding whether or not they're ready or their business is ready to franchise. So thanks again for tuning in. Hopefully this was helpful to you. Maybe spark some thoughts, some questions. As always, you feel free to reach out to me, Josh at Indy, INDY, franchiselaw.com. And until the next time, happy franchising.
Thanks for being with us today on the Franchise Euphoria podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to go to iTunes and provide a review. Also, please remember that although Josh Brown is a licensed and practicing attorney, nothing contained in this podcast should be construed as legal advice, because it is not. The information contained in this podcast is general and educational in nature, and none of it should be relied upon as legal advice. That being said, if you have questions for Josh and would like to contact him, please email him at josh@franchiseeuphoria.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you tune in to our next weekly episode.